I'm not interested in just making $1 million or $2 million bucks. I want to build an actual business.
My job is to provide opportunities to them, and their job is to take advantage of these opportunities.
You're not going to find the right employee and keep them if you're not the right decision maker.
So basically, you can teach and train on the skill sets, but not on the attitude.
You want them in their head to say, you know what, that's not for me. I'm just looking for a paycheck.
No one likes to change.
No matter how many skills I can teach my staff, if they're empty as an individual, those hard skills are a waste.
Welcome everyone to the Money Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Ella Rivkin, and today we have with us a remarkable guest, Raphael Mavi. Raphael is an accomplished entrepreneur, team culture consultant, and a small business owner's advocate. He is also the founder of successful venture that focuses on empowering businesses to foster strong team culture and achieve sustainable growth. So without further ado, welcome, Raphael, and it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, and I appreciate your invite for having me on your podcast. You and I have known each other for quite a few years already. I think going back to about a good 7-8 years at least.
Yeah.
And I've seen your journey from traditional to online, and then the merge of the two. So that was a thrill to observe as well.
Yes, thank you. And we actually used to work together. You helped me to build the culture, to build the leadership. And these are the things that we're going to be discussing today. So it's going to be very, very packed with golden nuggets. So make sure that if you are the business owners, please stay till the end, as you really do not want to miss any of this. So before we're going to dive into the discussions of the leadership, the culture, and how to build a successful business, if you can just share with us, how did you start? How did your journey start? If you can share a bit about your background and what led you to become an entrepreneur as well as the team culture consultant.
Okay. How much time we have? I'm just kidding. So my journey actually started back in 2004 when I picked up a book. And for the first time in my life, I decided to read the book from cover to cover. And that was on my honeymoon. And as I've been reading the book, it was a cruise ship. So every time we would get off an island, I'll be reading the book. And I've had a handful of other tourists, from the cruise ship walk by and notice the book, and they complimented me on the book. And I had no clue that the book was so popular. And by the way, the name of the book was Rich Dad Poor Dad. And I was a W-2 employee working as a network engineer, desktop support for Montefiore Hospital. I have never in my life thought about entrepreneurship, being in sales, working for myself, doing what I do today, nowhere even close. And as I've read the book, that book definitely opened up my mindset in regards to the definition of finances and having control of your own path. Now, what I just said is not for everybody, but it resonated with me because I guess it was the right message at the right time in my life. Fast forward 8-9 months, several events occurred in my workspace where I was completely disgusted with the way management handled the situation. And I realized that, I'm going to put the information that I've learned in the book to use, and I'm going to submit my resignation. So January of 2005, I quit my full-time job, and I vowed to myself never, ever, ever to go back again, simply because, not just because of the book I read, but it's a chip that I started carrying on my shoulder where one of the project managers said to another project manager, he said, "Oh, he'll be back. They'll all come back." That just pissed me off really badly, and I'm like, I'm definitely not coming back. And I ended up in sales. And it was a field that I had nothing to do with. I have never ventured into sales. I never thought about being a salesperson. My personality, anybody watching this people that know me, they would tell you the same thing. My personality was the complete opposite of the traditional salesperson that we know of. But as I've learned more and more about sales, I realized it's really not about me making a sale. It's really about me listening to whoever I'm working with to help them. So it became more of a helping journey rather than a sales journey, right? To exercise the ears more often than you do your mouth, and that's a success. So long story short, sales career turned into public speaking. That's another thing that I never, ever, ever, ever thought I would be able to do. But I was placed in that position because I didn't have a choice. It was in direct sales, and my mentor told me either you speak in front of a group or you lose your business, and I couldn't afford to lose my business. And for the next 2 years, I went out there and made a complete ass out of myself in front of a room. I would end up with like starting a meeting with 60 people and ending up with about 12 or 13 still sitting in the room. It was a disaster. That scaled up into speaking in front of 1,500 people in Las Vegas at a conference. And then that led me into consulting for a franchise skincare company back in 2013 and 14. That venture led me into running my own skincare company with two other partners. Collectively, between that and my consulting, I hired, trained, and retained over 200 full-time employees. So that gave me the expertise on culture development and leadership development. Unfortunately, partnership didn't work out, and I ended up being a solopreneur consultant. And I'm like, that's it. No more employees, no more headaches, no more payroll. I'm going to be my own person, doing what I know how to do best, and that's it. Started doing consulting, and my consulting ventures basically took me through the banking industry, through accounting, through legal, and for the most part was healthcare. Smaller clients started to pop up, and they were asking me like, hey, can you help us with marketing? I'm like, no, because I didn't want to do marketing. I didn't want to subcontract. I didn't want to outsource because it's my name, it's my reputation. I just wanted to stick to what I knew how to do best. But eventually I had to started finding the right people and started to subcontract that type of work. And that led me into doing it on more consistent basis. Then COVID happened. I went back to zero, lost all of my clients. And the agency that I was working with, we partnered up. And I said, I'm going to focus only on healthcare for a handful of reasons. Actually, we made a recent post on Instagram about why I chose healthcare. There's a handful of reasons, not just because people say, oh, because it's an industry that didn't shut down during COVID. Well, for first 2 weeks, everybody shut down, right? And then they started opening up the essential businesses. But it's way more than that. Number one, it's an industry that spoke the closest to me. This is the industry that I knew the most about. It was less profitable than, for example, working with banks or lawyers, right? However, it was also less headaches. So I figured it's more sustainable, it's more long-term, even though I'll take a less profit margin, but I'll look at it as a long-term relationship rather than a high profit margin and a short-term relationship. This is why I was always against, and no offense to anybody out there, doing high-ticket coaching, all of these things. I'm like, I'm not interested in just making $1 million or $2 million. I want to build an actual business, because if in the future one of my kids wants to take over and run it, I can pass it along to them. So I agreed to having a commitment to having employees once again, because I realized that without a team, there's only so much that we can do on our own, But culture development and employee retention, leadership development was and still is my expertise. Marketing is just something that we started to do on the back end to help the businesses. And even with that said, I still tell my clients that the best marketing you can ever do for your practice is to properly onboard the right people, not the good people, the right people, because you can make them good if they're the right people. But if you can't always make them the right people just because they're good or things look good on the resume, and that's the best thing a decision maker can do for their business, is to properly onboard the right people, train them, and create a culture where a person is happy to show up to work. Because when your staff is doing what they're supposed to do because they want to do it, then your customer knows that they're in the right place.
Yeah, absolutely, totally agree. And what an inspiring story to hear how your experience shaped your career. Wow, that's incredible. And I actually love that book, the book that you just shared, Think and Grow Rich. I absolutely love that book. I remember the first time when I read this, I was so much inspired.
Think and Grow Rich was the second or third book I read. The book that I was referring to was Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Okay, because I thought that you said Think and Grow Rich. Okay, yeah, both of them are phenomenal books. They're both of them absolutely phenomenal, and it's definitely once you read them, it just shapes your mindset and you start living and thinking in a different way. Yeah, absolutely
Absolutely.
love that.
Your mind will never go back to its original way of paradigm after you read those books.
Yeah,
for sure.
Definitely. Okay, well, so there's so many things that you mentioned, and I definitely want to make sure that we cover all of them. So, let's start, I guess, with the. You just talked about the right employees. Being a business owners, they face so many challenges, especially hiring the right employees. And you just touched based on that. So if you can just share what are some of the key things that the employers should be paying attention to, should start practicing whenever they're looking for the right employees, how to even identify the right employer?
Well, before I tell you how to identify the right employee, I have to set this up correctly. You're not going to find the right employee and keep them if you're not the right decision maker. You have to be the right individual in order for you to attract the person you want to keep. Not the type of person you want to hire, but the type of person you want to keep. And I'll give you a great example. And as a business owner, all of us can relate this. Not most of you, all of us. How many times have we been in a situation where we find the right person, we love the way it looks like on resume, the interview, they're happy, they're eager, whether it's out of desperation mode because they're going to find a job, or they really liked your workspace or even your personality at the interview. But then you onboard them, they go through training, a month, 2, 3, maybe 4 months go by, and all of a sudden they give you 2 weeks notice and possibly even don't even show up to work. But we all thought they were the right person in the beginning.
Been there, right? Been through this whole experience.
Yeah, I think we all have. I have, even as a consultant, I've been in those shoes doing this for my clients. And what I've realized is that we may have found the right person, but we weren't the right employer for them.
So what does that mean?
And that's a tough pill to swallow, because we think that we write the check, so we have to be the right employer, right? Well, I'm there. I provided everything for them. They have the coffee room. They have the break room. They have all of these perks and all of these things. What more can they want of me? Well, they spend 30% of their entire life in your workspace. What exactly are you doing besides giving them a task and a paycheck?
Okay, so now we're going to the culture, right? So that's very important.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Now, and I don't mean to say that, as an employer, I run my company based on whatever my employees want. That is not what I'm saying. Okay. I prefer to call this a empathetic dictatorship, right? Meaning they're still going to end up doing what I want them to do. But number one, I'm paying attention to them. I'm asking them questions. I'm always open to constructive criticism. Why? Because there's always room for growth. Now, if there's merit behind their criticism or their suggestion, I'm going to follow through with that, whether I speak to my managers, whatever the case is, right? But at the end of the day, I have to be the right employer.
Right.
Once I identify how to be the right employer, and there are many great books on this, on leadership development, how to become the right employer. Once I identify that, and it will take a lot of self-awareness, how to identify the right employee? Well, number one, I have to look for the attitude. That is the most important thing that I will ever look for at the interview, post the interview. If it's a high caliber position, maybe I'll take them out to lunch and conduct the second part of the interview there and pay attention to the things, how they are with the waiters, how they are with their food, for example, right? Because I'm looking more for personality, because if they have the capability, the bandwidth to learn the skill set that I need them to learn, I can teach that.
So basically you can teach and train on the skill sets, but not on the attitude.
Exactly. So first and foremost, I'm going to look for the attitude and personality as far as the right employee. Second thing, I want to look at their pattern of holding a job over the last 2 to 5 years. If I see them jumping every several months, that's a red flag for me. I don't care how nice, how personable they are at the interview. They could sell me whatever they want to sell. If I see an inconsistency with holding a job, that's a red flag. So those are just a couple of things. The third part is I want to see if my culture and my values align with what and how they think. Therefore, at the interview, I will ask them certain questions that are going to be aligned with what I want to recruit. I want to recruit them into a culture. I don't want to hire them into a position, if that makes sense. Right? And most employers, we look at a resume, they fit the position, and we call them in for the interview based on their resume. So we're hiring into a position based on their skill set, based on their, the pedigree and the references. But we neglect as far as who they are as an individual.
No, and I totally can relate this. Going back from my experiences, I remember, and you mentioned that. I think that a lot of the business owners, we get to the point where we're so desperate and we just need to fill this spot. So we just look at the skills, but we don't look at, as you mentioned, the culture, the attitude. Some don't even know that. I mean, now I know, being a business owner, now I learned from you. Thanks God I had you as my coach as well. So I learned that this is very important. But many of business owners, they're just to fill the spot. They're just looking at the skills, and we miss these red flags, as you mentioned.
Absolutely. You want to find somebody who wants to grow, a person of growth. Like, I've had numerous incidents where I ended up not hiring the person for whatever reason, whether it was their decision, whether it was our decision, but they understood who I was as an employer. They went ahead online, searched me up, and they started following me on whatever social media platforms it was, because they wanted to tap into that learning growth process for their life, right? And I think that's great, because even if just because they didn't work out now, doesn't mean they're not going to work out in a year from now for you.
Yeah. Oh, and you just mentioned that. So the growth, and then how the employee went to research and did the search. So I'm all constantly go through this hiring process, and those that are listening as business owners, I'm sure that they go through this hiring process all the time. And one of the things we have in our hiring process is that we ask the employees, whoever is trying to recruit, is to come prepared to the interview to do their own research on the company. I mean, like, the way I understand, and the way, like, I would feel, like, if I was the one who was looking for a job, if I'm going to work for the company, I want to know everything about the company that I want to be working with. So but
Absolutely.
Now, since we're working remotely, so we asked them to do this search, and then we asked them at the interview, okay, like, what do you know about the company? So if you can just touch base on this, like, how important is that? Like, what are some of the things that, especially those that working online, like, and even not online, even if it's just an employee comes in for the face-to-face interview in this medical office or any kind of business, like, how important is that the employee, the prospect, has to do his own homework?
The answer is very simple. It's extremely important. So one of the questions I do ask, doesn't matter what the role that we're trying to hire for is, I do ask, how much did you research about our company? Have you been through the website? Have you looked at LinkedIn? How much do you know? And if they say, to be honest with you, I haven't looked, to me, that is not a good sign. That is not a good sign at all. Okay? For many reasons, because how they have prepared, or how they've shown lack of preparation for the interview, is going to trickle over into their work performance as well. That means they're not the type of person who's going to go and do the due diligence on their own until they're told to do something. I don't want to keep that kind of person, because that means you constantly have to monitor and babysit them. You want somebody on your team who's going to be self-accountable to their own growth. So I do ask that question at the interview. I like your question. It's really important.
Yeah. No, and listen, I totally agree with you with the points that you just mentioned. Yeah, like, if you didn't take the time to do your own homework, then when you're going to start working for the company, that
just simply means that they're used to being told what to do.
Yeah.
Right? Can you train to do the opposite? Of course, but they have to be the right individual.
Yeah.
You can train somebody to do that. Like with me, I'm the perfect example of someone who was in corporate, who was constantly told what to do, and I got used to that for 6 straight years between 19 and 25, right? And then when you go into the entrepreneurial world or even self-employment world, nobody's out there going to tell you what to do. You have to figure everything out for yourself, you know? And I'm not saying I'm hiring an employee for them to become an entrepreneur. No, I want to cultivate the entrepreneurial mindset while they're with me as an employee. They could be a high-performing employee, but we need them to have the right mindset so they don't have to rely on you. Not everybody's cut out to be self-employed, and that's okay, right? Everyone has their own timing in their life. But we want a team of self-sustaining, self-accountable individuals on the team.
Yeah, totally. So, and now that we're talking about the hiring, I mean, I think like for me, definitely it's the most painful part of the business aspect is going through this whole hiring process. And for those that are listening, probably you can resonate. So that's why we have this great expert, Raphael. So what would be some of the tips to shorten this whole hiring process? Like with me, I know like typically the way I do it, again, like that's the way I set up. So first we do the initial phone interview. I think like from the phone screening, you can already narrow down the amount of prospects to kind of shorten our time, because our time as business owners is very valuable. So, and then if they move to the next stage, then we do the interview with the manager. And then if they past that stage, then they go to me. So what would be your advice? What would be the right process to do the interview process?
Well, let's just clear something up, okay? I don't know if you noticed this, you probably have. Ever since 2020, the hiring process has been a lot more difficult. And we thought the tables are going to turn back in 22, right? And 23 especially, but they haven't. The problem still remains the same, and that is it's still challenging to hire the right people, qualified people. Doesn't matter what industry you're in, whether you're in finances, whether you're in medical. I've seen it everywhere. Even when we do marketing, I just came back from Colombia. We have an office there. My main office is in Jersey, but our team is in Colombia, in Manizales, and it's the same thing in that country as well. The struggle is everywhere the same way, and that's mainly because of the internet and because of the social programs that the government have issued, right? So the challenge didn't go away. Now, because the challenge didn't go away, it makes the employer a lot more aware of the need for us to get better, right? So to answer your question, I'm going to take it a step back, because before the first interview with your candidate, your ad, for the job opening, right, should speak volumes about who you are and what your culture on the team is. Because if the person is not about growth and is not about what you have in your organization, you want them to screen themselves out before they even get on the phone with you. You want them in their head to say, you know what, that's not for me, I'm just looking for a paycheck. So now you're creating a much stronger filtering process, right? Your funnel actually got bigger, but all the way in the beginning in the text, you have to specify exactly who you're looking for and exactly who you are, so they have the right expectation before they even decide whether they're going to work for you or not, right? Now, at the interview process, as an employer, let's say you have your policies and procedures. In your policies and procedures, you have your, the rule of conduct and all that good jazz, right? You have your core values, you have your principles, you have your the non-negotiable core values, you have the mission and vision statement. It's very important for us to communicate in that same language at the interview, because what's written in the book doesn't always mean what's going to happen. So at the interview, we have to speak to the candidate in the language of the policy and procedure booklet. So they have to understand that this is what it is all the way from the beginning. All the way from the beginning. Too many times I go in as a consultant, and great organization, great culture, but the decision maker or the manager, they're tired. They're tired of replacing people, right? And they're like, okay, we're going to introduce this. We're going to introduce this type of paperwork. We're going to introduce that. And I go in there, and these people have been there for 2-3 years, and all of a sudden something new is introduced. They're like, oh, we have core values now? We have mission and vision statement. Like, what the hell is this? I didn't sign up for this. Oh, I got to sign a new employee responsibility sheet. What is this? I've never done this before. So now it's all new to them, and people hate change. You know, it's natural. It's in our DNA. We hate change. We like comfort. It's normal. But if you set the level of expectation all the way from the beginning at the top, right, now you have the second attempt of that person screening themselves out. Or the opposite, they're going to be thrilled to work with you. They're going to be like, yes, this is the type of organization I want to belong to. It's all about growth and learning, right? We're learning in our downtime, and they're looking forward to it. So now basically becomes an interview for them, for you, right? We think we're interviewing them, but they also just screened us as well. And you'll know if it's the right person at the first interview. And then you will move up to the second and third interview. Whether it's in person or remote, it really doesn't matter because your questions have to be verbalized. It makes it a little more challenging when you do remote. And in my experience, I have realized this to be true, and I've been saying it since summer of 2020, that hybrid and remote work is going to be a whole lot more difficult for work environment, work culture. And we're seeing it. We're seeing it with small organizations with 15, 20 employees and all the way into thousands. I mean, look at what's happening with JP Morgan and Chase and all the other financial institutions, right? They're telling people to either come back to the offices or you're out. Because they realized how much it affects in a negative way the work culture. There's so much more effort that goes into retaining and cultivating relationships and the culture when your people are working remote. Constantly, Zoom, constantly virtual huddles, constant communication. It's very different than doing it in person. There's a lot more effort that goes into, and unfortunately, when you're a smaller business, it's easier for you to do it. But unfortunately, as the business grows bigger, it becomes more and more challenging. So when you're staying nimble, let's say under 50 employees, it's a whole lot more easier to get it done.
Yeah, totally can see that. Yeah, and I see this is a big trend right now that all these big corporations now they're bringing all the employees back to the offices.
Yeah, it's very costly. It's very costly to lose people.
It is, yeah.
I mean, it takes, statistically speaking, anywhere between 30 and 200% to replace an employee. And as the culture dwindles down, people get distracted. They start looking for another job, right? There's no more social threading in between working relationships, and people phase out. And employers understood it. They're like, hey, listen, it's costing us a whole lot more money than paying rent space for the facility to accommodate the 200 employees. Because that's what the thought process was in the beginning. People thought, oh, we're going to cut down. We don't need that many people in the office. Let them work remotely. We're going to go from 10,000 square feet to 3,000 square feet. But that rent expense is way less than the cost of replacing employees on an annualized basis.
Yeah, totally. If you look at it that way, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it takes much longer to find that employee recruits to train, and then once they start working at some point, then
Absolutely.
Yeah. So then, as I see that the team culture plays such a crucial aspect of any business. So how do you define a strong team culture?
The first way is very easy to look at it. You have to look at the retention percentage or attrition, turnover percentage. And if we're talking about small businesses, let's say whether it's contractors, roofers, lawyers, accountants, medical doctors, right? We're talking about actual physical business, not a virtual business. I look at 15% or less. So if you have a turnover of employees over an annualized basis of 15% or less, that means you have a strong work culture. Okay, that's the first thing I look at. First thing I ask a manager or decision maker, I'm like, what is your turnover rate? What's your attrition? If they say 30, 40%, that's very high. Something toxic is going on there. Bad management, poor leadership, very bad systems in place or lack of systems, most part of it. The only exception that I know of that I'm familiar with is the restaurant industry. That industry is notorious for having a very high turnover. That's understandable. Everything else, there's no excuse. The second way is I want to hear the language of the decision maker, who is communicating with their employees on a daily basis. What are they saying? What are they saying? The first thing that what comes out of their mouth the first thing that they show up to the office. So is it something negative? Is it something as a way of criticism, or is it something of a way of praise? Right? So you have to pay attention to the language and what they say. There's certain personality types where it's just natural for them to criticize first. It doesn't make them a bad person. That's just their innate individuality. As far as leadership goes, that is not a good trait. They need to work on that. And we're not trees. We're not like telephone poles. We're not stuck in our ways, right? We're human beings. We're capable of change as long as we are aware that change is necessary. So the language of that leadership is extremely important. And this is something I pay attention to. As a matter of fact, most of the time when I go into any facility, that is the first thing I pay attention to. Sometimes before I even sign a contract with a client, I want to listen to what comes out of their mouth.
So basically you're talking, it shouldn't be dictatorship, it should be leadership. It's how you
You could have a dictatorship, but you could do it in a way of where you're a great leader, right? Dictatorship meaning like you tell them what to do and it gets done, right? Because now it goes into the human behavior aspect. So if you're a good leader, if you're a great leader, your people will always do what you tell them with a smile on their face if they're afraid to let you down, not because they're afraid of you.
Yes.
That's the difference.
The difference. Yeah.
You don't want people to be afraid of you. You want people to admire and respect you so much that they're afraid to let you down. It's a different type of a leadership. You can still call it a dictatorship because it's your way or the highway. The difference is people are happy to do it. If your intentions are pure, if your intentions are for growth and your intentions are not to get them in trouble, people will sense it.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, makes sense. Love that. You touched base about the COVID and the challenges that we're still facing. So we can just talk a little bit more about the challenges and like the challenges that especially like small business owners, medical practices that they're facing, and what would be the strategies that you have found most effective to overcome these challenges, the challenges that the retention of the employees, the team culture, like what would be the strategies?
So one of the ways that's always been like this, it just became more necessary after 2020. And that is to invest more time, resources into training your staff. It has always been necessary. Okay, that's actually one of the reasons why I left corporate America. That's what started the whole journey in my mind of moving forward and doing something better, because I realized that company is not serving my best interest by preventing me from learning, from getting more certifications, getting more classes, things like that. So I'm always for more education and more training of my
more
team.
Education, more training in terms of the skills that
both. So we're talking about soft skills and hard skills. So we're talking about professional development and personal development. I'm of the opinion that personal development has to come first. Some people will disagree, which is fine. Okay. The reason why I stand strongly by my opinion, because I've been doing this for nearly 21 years, and time again, I see people that are having $50 million in revenue at annualized basis, and then $500,000 is the same thing. Soft skills, personal development is the foundation to the professional development. No matter how many skills I can teach my staff, if they're empty as an individual, those hard skills are a waste. That's what happens, and they're going to start jumping from one place to another because they can't find fulfillment themselves. All they're doing is chasing the next paycheck. I want to make sure that individual is a whole individual, and I will give them stuff, whether it's my own training, whether it's Tony Robbins, whether it's somebody else. I'll give them a book to read because I want them to build up themselves before they build up the hard skills. They could do it simultaneously too, depending on the capacity and the bandwidth of the individual. But personal development comes first. And more since COVID, days since 2020, it's a lot more necessary to start investing into our people for them to become better individuals. Because when we are dealing with better individuals, they become better, you fill in the blank. Employee, manager, spouse, brother, sister, child, whatever their roles are, they become better at that by having to grow their personal development.
Yeah, and I actually totally agree with that, because I'm very big on the development, personal development, business development, and what we actually practice in my firm is and you know that I'm huge on Tony Robbins and Grant Cardone. So now my whole team, they own Grant Cardone University. So that's actually part of the requirement, is daily requirement, that they need to listen at least 5 to 10 minutes a day. Obviously, if they want to listen to more of this training material. And but here's another thing now that we're talking about this, because like I totally with you on that. I have the same mindset. But first, let's talk from the employee's perspective. And I'm sure those that business owners that listening to us, maybe they, at some point, whoever is in this personal professional development, maybe they hear this resistance from the employees. Because in the beginning, when I introduced this to the team, there was like so much resistance from the employees. And you did mention in the beginning that no one likes to change. So that's how they saw this. In the beginning, they even felt that I'm shoving this into their throat. Okay, like, you love this, you love Tony Robbins, you love Grant Cardone. Like, why do I need to listen to this? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, let me ask you a question before I answer your question. Are the people that you are introducing these concepts and this information to, are they someone that have been with you for quite some time, and in the beginning it wasn't part of the agreement that working with you is going to be all about growth?
Yes, yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, because when we started, like, it was not about like all the growth and all this person.
It was a job. It was a job, right?
Yeah.
That goes back to what we covered earlier.
Okay, now it makes sense. You said I didn't think of that before.
Yeah, because you have to make sure that they know what you're about. You know, I have somebody sitting with me in the office right now, like second week into her job. I sat her down and explained things to her based on her personality type. You know, so I think I made it very clear all the way in the beginning what type of employer she should expect of me, to make sure to even figure out if it's worth it for her to keep moving forward with me.
Yeah.
Right. But let's say that didn't happen, right? Things happen and a couple of years go by, and all of a sudden you as the employer are now all about this personal development and so on and so forth. How do you introduce it, since people don't like to change? You're right. But people love improvement, though. So I would introduce the conversation as in, hey, listen, life was all about improvement. If we're not improving, we're all moving backwards. Why? Because everything else around us keeps moving forward. All right? So one of the ways for all of us to improve together, here's what I decided to do. And if this is not for you, it's okay too, to let them know I'm ready to replace you. I don't want to. I want to keep you. We've been together for a long time already. Okay? But I also want to make sure, since you've been with me for this amount of years, this is another way of me paying you back. I want to invest into you as an individual. You're doing a great job. I'm happy. You have your paycheck. I'm happy with your performance and everything else. But now I want to invest into you as an individual.
Yeah. Totally, right? Totally makes sense.
So that's the way I would introduce it.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, it is an investment on your part. They're investing in themselves only because you decided to invest into them.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's what I say. And I always say, listen, my job is to provide opportunities to them, and their job is to take advantage of these opportunities. Yeah. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, and it has to go both ways. And and you're totally right. Like, now that come to think of that, because as you mentioned, you have a person right now sitting with you, and I actually have my person that I recently hired, Alina, and you had the pleasure of meeting her. Because when I hired her, like, this whole thing, this whole recruiting was completely different. So first of all, and you mentioned like the red flags to pay attention to. So those that are listening to us, So this is something that I experienced, and these are the things that I started paying attention. So first I recruited her, and I do want to talk to you more about the recruiting aspect as well. So I recruited her, and then as you mentioned, like I sold her on the vision of the company. And then what I did is that I told her like to go do your homework right now. So, and then I noticed that she went at night and I saw that she was searching me at night on the social media. And then, so that was like a one check mark for me. The second one was that again, and from what I see, like if the person wants to be part of the company, you're going to act on the opportunity right away. You're not going to wait for it, right? So like if the opportunity presents to you. So like she was very fast. She responded right away. And then as you mentioned, like the vision, the mission, the core values, everything was presented to her once we had our first meeting. And like now, obviously it's completely different. She talks with that and she represents the company mission and vision. So yeah, it's much easier versus than trying to change and rebuild everything that was in the beginning.
Absolutely. It's an uphill battle, but it's
worth it. No, it's totally worth it. Yeah. So, but now let me talk about another thing, because I hear this very often working with the business owners. So we talked about the employees part, the training and how it's important, the personal development, business development. But then on the other hand, and going back to the mindset, so I hear a lot that business owners are saying, okay, like, why would I train this person, invest so much of my time, money, energy, teach them everything that I know so they can learn and then leave me? So what are your thoughts on that? Because I literally hear this every day whenever I coach and speak with my clients.
Yeah, it's one of the most commonly asked questions as well for me, and I've addressed this many times. It's very simple. First of all, if you don't train them, like if the person is meant or wanting to leave you, they're going to leave you regardless. If you don't train them, they're going to leave you faster. Very simple. Take it or leave it. Second thing is, I'm a huge fan of the saying by Sir Richard Branson, the founder of Virgin Records, Virgin Atlantic, multi-billionaire. He says that train your people so they could leave you. Treat your people so they wouldn't want to. Okay? I'll say it again. Train your people so they can leave you, so they can leave you. Treat your people so they wouldn't want to. So is it really about you training them, or is it more important on how you treat them?
Yeah. I love that. Wow. I love that.
The third reason is we're all ego-driven. Male, female, birth sign, whatever it is that you believe in. As humans, we're all ego-driven to some degree. And since we're all ego-driven, some more than others, we should be all concerned about our legacy and our reputation. If I train my staff and I treat them well, and even with those both things, they still end up leaving me. Let's say instead of 2 years, they're going to end up leaving in 5 years, right? Number one, it was already worth it because I kept them for 3 years longer because I've trained them and treated them well. But let's say after 5 years, what did I actually do besides all those positive benefits? I also created a brand ambassador for myself to feed my ego in the marketplace. Because now when they leave, yeah, who cares? They created competition for me. If you believe in competition, that's fine too, right? But I also created a brand ambassador. What if they went to work for somebody else? What if they went to work for my competitor? They didn't become my competition, but they went to work for my competitor because they got paid more, or whatever the case is. Or they had a falling out with one of my managers. Whatever the reason is, they will have nothing good to say or to think about me or my establishment, right? That's an ego-driven reason. Why? Because we're at the end of the day, we're all in business of creating more good brand ambassador. Your client, your best client, or your patient that is happy with your services, that is your free brand ambassador. Therefore, they can give you more referrals. So at the end of the day, we're all in business to create more brand ambassador. The question is, what are they going to say about your brand after how you treated them and after how you trained them? So those are my top 3 reasons why training is important, and the idea of scarcity, that they're going to leave and, it's going to be a waste of my money and time. It's irrelevant to me. I don't care, because in my mind, it doesn't exist.
Yeah. And I'll tell you that I totally agree with you and can resonate. When I started my career journey in the beginning, I was like, for me, it's all about the growth and development. And I remember in the beginning, like I didn't care even about the money, but then, because I was learning a lot. I was learning and I was growing. But the moment that I felt that that's it, I'm not growing anymore, I'm stuck. And then I got that treatment from my employers where they were not treating me right because like they were already got to the point where they were like that scarcity mindset. They were scared of losing me and they were kind of not allowing me to do certain things. So, and you mentioned that it's when you're not treating your employees well, then that's when they start thinking of leaving, because like I would never leave. I was, I liked it. I was growing, but once I stopped growing and once they started treating me poorly, so that's when I decided, okay, it's time to go.
I'll share this with you. It's not too often that I share this with anybody publicly, but for me, a big wake up moment was back in 2016 when my partnership fell apart. And between the three partners, I was the one who was leading the team, right? I was in charge of recruiting, interviewing, hiring, onboarding, and then training, and then also in the process of keeping them by providing training on a daily basis. So what happened was when my partnership fell apart, as soon as I left, June 30th of 2016, by end of August, so in the next almost 2 months, 50% of those employees out of the 77 on the payroll have quit. And to me, it was a little shocking. I knew there's going to be a handful that are going to leave right away, but 50% in less than 60 days. So what I started doing was I started asking a large percentage of those people that left. I said, what happened and why did you leave? And this is what I mentioned earlier on your podcast today. And that's where it hit me when the same answer was repeated multiple times. And their answer was, we were loyal to you and we were afraid to let you down, but we were not afraid of you as a leader.
Wow.
Right? And that came from, yes, we provided the training and everything, but how do you treat your staff? And when people told me that we're afraid to let you down, that opened up a completely different universe for me from a leadership standpoint. That was new to me. I didn't expect it. Yeah, it was a great ego boost, right? But I did not expect that. I just was not aware that this is what I created as a byproduct of exercising what I knew how to do best through proper training. Don't forget, I come from corporate world, right? This is something that I wasn't trained for. This is something that I did not even aspire to study. It's actually something that I was a victim of. Not a victim. I don't want to call myself a victim. I'm not a victim. But this is something that I guess I wanted from my management while I was growing in my career in my early 20s.
Yeah. So you mentioned right now too, you mentioned so the ego and the self-awareness, I guess you just mentioned that. So and you mentioned even in the beginning of the podcast that you need to be self-aware. So majority of this, it comes from us as the business owners, as the leaders. So, and I see a lot of this working with the clients, with the small business owners, where the ego is overweight that self-awareness. So what would be your suggestion? Like what would be some of the strategies that the business owners can implement, or maybe to start paying attention to some of the things? At some point, I realized in my business a couple of years ago when me and you started working together, I realized for myself that I was the biggest problem in my business. And this is when that self-awareness...
I think that goes for most of us. I think that goes for most of us. We are the biggest problem in our business.
We are the biggest problem in the business, but we don't realize that because that ego overweights that self-awareness. So...
Yes.
That something needs to click in us for that self-awareness to overweight the ego, for us to realize that.
I don't know if there's a clear-cut answer for that, because I think a lot of it has to do with timing. A lot of it has to do with, I'll give you a good example. An employer that has a huge ego and he thinks, and I say he for a reason because somebody in particular comes to mind. He thinks that every decision that he's made in the last, let's say, 5 years has been the right decision because he took him from 2 million to over 20 million in revenue inside of 5 years. Now, all of a sudden, he is at a point where he's about to lose his right hand person because of the ego. And no matter what he does, the person still leaves. That delivers a crush to his ego. Like, he was devastated. In the next 6 months, the person completely does a 180, changes the way he does business. And all it took is one person to leave, that the decision maker completely relied on.
So basically, you're saying that something tragic has to happen for us to realize that.
It doesn't have to be tragic, but it has to be something acute, right? That could be one of those things. Another thing could be time. A person is getting older, they realize it's more about their legacy instead of their current bank account. That could be something else, right? So I will not have a definite answer for you. It could be different things for different people. And sometimes, I hate to tell you this, that it's nothing. No matter what you say or you will do, will change the person's opinion. There's a great phrase by Dale Carnegie from How to Win Friends and Influence People. In the book, it says, a man convinced against his will be of the same opinion still. So it is not my job as a consultant to convince someone, hey, listen, your ego is as big as as a doorway. It's not up to me. I can only show them the possibility if they put their ego to the side, but it's up to them to realize the self-awareness part, right? If it's true for them at that point in their life or not.
Yeah, totally makes sense. Yeah, totally makes sense.
So I try not to break my head over this. It is what it is, but it is my responsibility to show it to them.
Yes, yeah. Okay, so we touched based on the employees. So now if we can switch the gears and if we can talk a little bit more about the retention of the clients. So especially in the healthcare industry, medical practice owners, what I notice is that they often struggle with the retention of the patients, of the clients. I mean, even if you're not in medical practice owners, it's the client's retention. So what would be some of the strategies or key lessons that you would recommend?
Okay, so with healthcare, it's a little different than, for example, in accounting or with lawyers, right? With lawyers, it's a lot more transactional. The case is closed, you're done. You wait until the next event in that person's life. With accounting, it's definitely a little different, and there's a lot of keys that play a role in retaining a customer, like for years, could be decades, right? It could be a generational thing as well. With medicine, it's slightly different because now you're dealing with a sick patient, whether it's a psych, whether it's pain management, whether it's surgical, whatever, it doesn't matter, GI, and that comes down to your doctors. If you have doctors working on your team, unless you're by yourself and you're treating patients, it comes down to the experience of the patient with you. Yes, as a clinical professional, you will diagnose them, you will provide the proper, path of treatment, but what is their experience? Number one, what is their experience with you? The second part is, what does rebooking a patient look like with the front desk? Most of the time, when the front desk neglects or forgets to rebook that patient for the next appointment, chances are that patient is not going to call you until 6 months go by. You call as a hello, are you still alive? Please come back. We need to do another checkup, or maybe it's an annual thing, right? So your ability to rebook that patient from appointment to appointment. So before they leave the facility, I always encourage the front desk to make sure you book their next appointment, whether it's next week, next month, or in 6 months. So you have to take matter into your own hands to rebook them. And don't forget the experience they had with you as a clinician. There are a lot of great doctors, professionals out there, but the experience the patient has with them is not so good, right? Horrible bedside manners, bad communication skills, but they're a good diagnostician. Doesn't mean anything. You could have the best product in the world. If it doesn't talk to the consumer, nobody really will appreciate the quality of your product. So you need to know how to hook them. Especially lately, like we're all, suckers for reviews. All it takes is for somebody to look in their phone and find your competitor with better reviews or good reviews, and they'll leave. We live in a very hyper competitive marketplace today. Everyone. Even though in my own head I don't have competition, but there's services inside of my business that does have competitors. So therefore, technically, they are a competitor, right? So it has become extremely competitive, almost every industry that I look at.
Yeah. So basically, okay. So just to emphasize. So basically, the number one thing is that the experience that the patients or the clients, depending whatever industry that you have with if it's a patient, then with the doctor, or if it's depending on the business. And then the next thing is the front desk. So to make sure that you book these appointments right away.
Yeah, front desk or whatever. Like, listen, there's medical offices. If you're talking about healthcare, there are medical offices that are very modernized, and they don't have a front desk. It's all automated. It's machines, right? So what does a follow-up look like? Is the patient getting a text message as soon as they leave, or is it scheduled to get a text message half an hour or maybe in an hour when they get home, whatever the case may be? So there's got to be some kind of follow-up system in place where the rebooking process, not guaranteed, but has a high chance of happening rather than leaving it in the patient's hands.
No, and I totally agree with you, because I have many healthcare practitioners that I work with, and that's, and it's not just that many business owners. We constantly running looking for this new patients, new clients to bring into our business. But then in reality, we already have so much. We're just not aware. We're just not paying attention. And these are just simple things, as you mentioned. If you're already seeing that patient right now, why don't you just have the system book the appointment, make sure that you follow up, and make sure that that patient comes back to you, that you don't even need to. And as you mentioned, because I see this very often, I work on in particular with one, and that just comes up to my mind right now with one of my clients. So she's in healthcare industry. So what I did with her, I literally we sat down and put together the whole database of all the clients. So the first one, just to see all the clients that you have, and then the next step, okay, like when was the last time you saw them? And that was such a big awareness, because some of the clients she saw like only 2 years ago, 3 years ago. So that means, okay, they came, they had a problem. The problem was solved, and then they left, they forgot, no one followed up with them. But you do need to follow up with them at least like on every 6 months basis. So you can do it even often.
Yeah. Absolutely. And one thing that I've noticed a lot of practitioners do, they do sort of like a community event, meaning let's say you have a patient base of 200, 500, 1,000 or plus patients. Once a month, you could offer an in-service type of a free event based on your specialty. So you could do like an educational workshop for your patients, and you could say, by the way, you could invite your friends, family. Let's say if I'm a gastroenterologist, I'm going to talk about gut health, right? And I'm going to talk about certain things that they can do at home, maybe educate them on proper nutrition to avoid illnesses in the future. Now, as a doctor, obviously people still get sick, and who are they going to think of first to go to see? They're going to come see me, right? But let's say once a month or every fourth Thursday of the month, I offer an event after my clinic is shut down already for a maximum of 30 people. It gets offered to every single patient that checks out. It's upon checkout. Say we have a free event coming up. It's a 30-minute, 45-minute workshop, completely free, just for our patients and their friends and family only. And there's a limited seating, 30 people. And I do this class. I do wine and cheese. They may invite their people. A lot of doctors, they think, oh my God, this is taboo. This is something like a yoga instructor will do. Like, no. Human beings are human beings. Like, we're people. We want to get more information. We want to belong to a social club, right? There's nothing wrong with that. But that will create a higher level of retention, because now the patient not just sees you as a patient, but they're also attached to they're exposed to your facility one extra time
for
additional information where otherwise they wouldn't have gotten. And now they also brought new people to you as well.
Yeah, totally. And I absolutely love that. Yeah. And then also they see you as an expert. And then, as you mentioned, everyone is looking for this information. And we still go and search, look for this information somewhere else. Why would we do this if we can get it directly from the person that we're already working with? Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, I love that. All right. So, and we can talk on and on, but I just want to be very mindful of your time. I guess lastly, I just wanted to touch base a little bit more on the marketing. So the importance of the marketing for the businesses to bring the new clients, to retain the clients. So if you can just talk a little bit more about the marketing.
There's a lot to talk about marketing. Are we talking about online marketing or in-house marketing? What are we referring to?
Well, I guess for the sake of the time, let's just, what would be like the most important things that the business owners needs to pay attention in terms of like?
Well, first and foremost, as a business owner, let's say if I would be a doctor, the first thing I would be paying attention to are my reviews, right? Meaning, what am I doing to enhance and improve the reviews that the patients are leaving? Experience, diagnostics, patient relationships, right? How is my staff trained to handle my patients? All of those things. And then I would monitor reviews. I would get more reviews. I would be deliberate with getting reviews. Don't rely on, cell phones. Don't rely on the text messages going out to your patients. Be deliberate. If it's face-to-face, if you do have a front desk in your facility, I would have my staff trained on how to ask every patient, maybe even with a QR card, to give the patient or have them scan it right on the spot to leave their feedback. Never ask for positive review because that's illegal, but ask for their feedback. Say, we would greatly appreciate your feedback. We value every single patient here. We want to hear from you.
So the review, it falls still back to the marketing part, right? Okay, absolutely. So it's all part of the marketing.
Absolutely, because reviews is what helps you convert a new patient, a prospect to a patient. Because as they're looking online, they want to see social proof. So reviews matter. That's one. Number two, I would pay attention to, assuming that you're doing some sort of marketing, whether it's search engine optimization, whether it's social media, whether it's pay-per-click campaigns, whatever the case is, I would highly recommend you pay attention to your conversion rates, meaning how well is your front desk trained. I'm picking up the phones, I'm answering your requests from, requesting an appointment from online. How quick are they to respond? What are they saying over the phone? Do they have the proper scripts? Have you tested them? Did you play secret shopper by having somebody else call the office and to test them out? That's all part of marketing. Because I see way too often business owners spend $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 a month on marketing, but they have no ability to track it. They rely on a marketing company to give them all this data, and yet they don't know how to read it. And they're missing internal data. So I would recommend to the doctors, look at the EMR. If you're not in medicine, that's like your CRM for your clinic. Look at the EMR reports and compare it to the outside marketing. What does Google tell you? And how does that relate to your phone calls? And how does that relate to your patient profile database? Is your front desk asking every time a new patient, how did you hear about us? And make sure you have a way to indicate where the referral source is coming from, right? So in my company, this is what we look at. We compare everything, and we provide our clients everything once a month so they can see it for transparency purposes. That's all marketing. It's easy to spend money on marketing, but it's not easy to track it. Okay? But marketing source is whatever you choose, whatever works best for you, for your niche in your marketplace. You have to look at how many competitors you have. Make sure you research your competitors to see what they're doing, how much money they're spending. You could find all of that out. It's not, secret information.
Yeah, absolutely. And yes, it's all about measuring. It's all about analyzing, because otherwise you're just spending money and you don't even know for what. So you definitely need to analyze it and see even if it works and what.
Absolutely. And compare it. And again, for that's why we started the podcast. This is exactly why it's so important to train your staff, because without proper training, it's extremely difficult virtually impossible for you to track data.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I love this. This was absolutely incredible. I think we can go on and on. There's so much that we can cover. We definitely need to do one more, or maybe even few more. And I guess before we wrap up, just some last words of wisdom, some advices for small business owners.
I would say this: keep a close eye on your staff performance. Keep a close eye on how you communicate with your team. Meaning, be mindful, be aware of your communication style with your team, on your leadership ability. You don't have to be a hard ass to be a good boss. Okay? You could still get a lot done by being empathetic, but being firm. You could be both. You can be firm with a lot of empathy. And keep a close eye on your conversions when it comes to marketing. Don't ever rely on a marketing company. I can tell you this, as a marketer myself, as someone who owns a marketing department in my company that services our clients, do not ever rely on a single marketing company to do everything for you. I always tell my clients, number one, you have to keep control of everything, meaning of your domain, of your hosting, of your everything. Because God forbid, you don't know what happens to the marketing company or the owner tomorrow. You have to maintain control with having them access to that information. Number two is I would not get into a long-term contractual commitment to get something done. Meaning, in order for me to deserve your business, I have to earn your business. And that's the way I think everyone should run their practice as well. And that goes the same for the business owners, your listeners, how you treat your patients. Right? Why is the patient supposed to be coming back to you? Did they earn your trust? Do you deserve their trust? Right? So we have to be mindful of these things and stop resting on our laurels just because we've been doing business for 10, 15, 20, 30 years. Because there's a new guy on the block, there's a new gal on the block that is hungrier than you and that is more innovative than you and more resourceful than you. And they will find a way how to take your clients. Trust me, they will. If you rest on your laurels, if you think you've made it, they're going to take your business away from you.
Yeah, and I do see this very often, and I think it's the key words is that you cannot do the business the same way that you used to do it 20, 30 years ago. Honestly, you cannot even do it the same as it was before COVID. So, yeah,
absolutely.
Things change.
Things change all the time. Yep. We have to be learning, always. Continue to learn, always.
Yeah, if you're not ahead, you're behind. That's what I always say. And then especially today, like after COVID, we move so fast, just like you mentioned, there's always will be someone who just going to open down the block, someone innovative, young, full of energy. And that's it. It's just he's just going to take it over.
That's right. They're ready to work more hours than you. They're ready to, treat their people differently than you do. And before you know it, they're not even going to take your clients. They're going to take your staff as well.
Yeah.
I've seen it happen way too many times.
Yeah, totally agree that. Yes, well, this was fantastic, Raphael. It's been wonderful having you on the Money Mindset podcast.
Okay.
Thank you so much. I think your insights on the team culture and small businesses advocacy are absolutely invaluable, as well as the recruiting, the marketing. So I think that was phenomenal. We definitely will do one more of this. And thank you so much to our viewers. So I will share all the contact. And if any of you would like to reach out to Raphael, I'm going to share all the contacts. And thank you for being with us, Raphael. And to all the viewers, thank you for being with us. If any of you have any questions, anything, definitely send us. And we will have Raphael one more time. We'll invite him. We'll discuss. There's a lot that can be discussed. And remember, guys, it's all in your hands.